I would love to share a story of World War One, and that's the story of the Suez. Now, it's a little dated now, but some people might know of the Evergreen ship that got stuck in the Suez. And for nearly a month, how everybody was in panic, because imagine what did Suez do? It shortened the distance between Europe, or rather the Western Hemisphere, and India, uh, so that they don't have to sail all the way around the African continent. So we saw what could happen. And during the World War One, which is called the Great War, at one stage, Germany, which was in ascendancy, and Baron von Stein, he is an advisor to the Turkish military, and there is an offensive by Turkey, literally threatening to slice the Suez into two. And who goes to defend Suez? The troops that go are from the 62 Punjab, part of the 11 and 12 Indian Division. They're the ones who are finally stationed. And who goes to provide the gunfire support, the naval gunfire support among the ships? It was HMIS Hardinge, whose gun crew were Indians. So even in this, where the battle is, unfortunately, we don't have too many details, but what little I could piece together, the attack was repulsed and Suez remained. Hardinge continued to operate over there. And there were three other ships: Northbrook, Dufferin, and the four total ships. They acquitted themselves with glory. They continued doing patrols in the Gulf, in East Africa, in that segment. But unfortunately, as soon as the war got over, the powers to be decided, the Indian waters didn't need a full-time navy. And this is against the advice of the admirals who were in command. And they felt that the Indian waters needed a residential navy. There were many committees. Today, I don't want to share much. I normally talk a lot about that. They all recommended. There was a 9-year plan. There was a Chatfield committee report that there must be a full-fledged navy. And they almost signed a bill to have a Royal Indian Navy. It lost the vote in the Central Legislature by 1 vote. But finally, on 2nd of October 1934, the Royal Indian Navy was commissioned at what today is the dockyard dispensary in the Naval Dockyard in Mumbai. It's over there. And then later there was a whole parade in what is presently the Brabant Stadium region. And that was when there was a flag officer commanding the Royal Indian Navy. It had just a few ships, and that is 1934. And that decade, the middle of the 1930s, heading towards 39, the world was heading into a turmoil. All the plan and the enthusiasm with which the League of Nations had been formed did not seem to be successful. Many parts of what would be colonial Britain, there were uprisings, there were movements. India by then had, and I think now when the book Revolutionaries is talking about both the armed action and the unarmed action, all components were part of, we need to have a sovereign independence and be our own. We come out of the dominion status that was there. In that element, Europe was in a turmoil. And that delicate balance of power was not happening, falling apart. And finally, you know about Hitler marching into Poland. And then Lord Linlithgow, the Viceroy of India, just unilaterally declared India is at war. Now, initially, of course, there was huge protest. How can you, declare? Because there was some kind of political power already transferred through certain institutions, however effective or ineffective they would have been. But very soon, very surprisingly, the leaders of the political component of the independence movement supported participation of India in the World War. And I think their aim was very clear. They knew independence is around the corner. I mean, that kind of everyone knew. The only challenge was the date. And I'll talk about date later. So they felt you need battle experience. And you can't create a battle, though, people do try create battles. Okay. But I don't want to go into conspiracy theories here. But the fact is they wanted that experience. And so that is what, as soon as the war got declared, these were the 5 ships of the Royal Indian Navy which were out on patrol within the first month, fully ready for battle into the Gulf and into the Gulf of Aden and the Persian or Arabian Gulf, depending on how you call it. And just note these were the ships, old sloops. And if you notice some names, let me just quickly flash. I know those watching on the mobile, the text may be small. Clive, Cornwallis, and Indus were nearly 2 decades old. These ships were about to be decommissioned. And so if I show you back, were not going to have a navy, and what little navy we had was going to be reduced to half. So this rationalization, which is a new good name for reduction, was at hand. And yet when the battle comes, the oldest ships were the first out on battle, and they acquitted themselves with real valor and glory. So that's one thing. One of my early points in conveying through this narrative is investment in a navy. We talk of GDP and we talk of investment in infrastructure. When you invest in a navy, you're investing at least 4 decades of the nation's history to come. Because it takes time to design a ship. It takes time to build a ship. It takes time to operationalize a ship. And then the ship serves, design-wise, maybe 20 years. But we know of enough ships, 30 years, 40 years. I mean, they live up. So do you know the amount of investment, the number of people, the legacies, the traditions, the practices, the prowess they build? That is what is investing. And that's my aim. I mean, even before I start the story, and that is it. So my first story, I'm not sharing many stories, but just enough for you to probably get the book. But before the story, this is the slide of pride for me. And I wish I may be given time, and maybe one of my future interns can help me make a better graphic. So I've started becoming lazy. My energy of a few decades back is not the same. But this is what I've tried. This is a map of the Naval India at that time. And these bullets indicate where all Indians were during the World War. Look at the span from the North Atlantic to Singapore Straits, from Madagascar to the Araucans, operating extensively in the Persian Gulf, in the Red Sea, action in South Indian Ocean, and leading anti-submarine forces in the Mediterranean. I mean, it's impressive. And there were people, these were the people who planned the Navy of nascent India. So even if it was before our independence, fact is we were operating, and it was a legacy of what we were operating many, many years ago, years earlier. We were operating in many parts. China has hired storytellers like Gavin Menezes to artificially create stories as if Zanga invented the whole world and populated the whole world. That's totally a story. Admiral Arun Prakash talks a lot about that in the books that were written. But for us today, when genetics are analyzed of the aborigines in Australia, people find there are genetic roots to Indian connections. So there are 2 stories. One, sea conditions were different. People could have walked across, but the reality is it was more of a maritime connectivity. So that's the span of the theaters. So let's just cover one of them, and that's I call the fascinating story of. They said this is in the words of Admiral Krishnan, an hour of battle, a medal forever. So what's the story? So young Neelkant Krishnan was on this ship, and he writes. Neelkant Krishnan, Admiral Krishnan is a very fascinating character. And Arjun, his son, has written a lot. I'm just opening the story in my but so the whole book's sailor story captures the whole account. I'll get okay. The bottom line is even Sardar Panikar got this story wrong. And he wrote the story Admiral Krishnan killed the admiral of Iranian Navy. That's not true. Okay. He was involved in a landing operation, or rather a boarding party, which is a small troop of people, and he was heading. And he had a petty officer, and he had a small team of sailors. And they go out on a small craft, sail up, and there are 3 Persian gunboats. Now, he's a regular naval officer, but the story is a story like a commando operation. Okay, and he enters from one hatch, drops in a grenade, goes down, and he has a pistol in his hand. And from in front of him, the commanding officer, the captain of the gunboat, comes, and literally, like some Western cowboy movies, he shoots. And the captain's, the other guy's bullet just whizzes past Krishnan, and his bullet hits home. So he actually says later, I could have been just a story. And so that is the amazing story of Neelkant Krishnan. You can read more in the sailor story. You can read a bit more on in Timeless Wake, and he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for that. So this is battle experience. This is not something you get trained for to do an operation. And that's just kind of not all. There is another story of evacuation of an Indian contingent that was stuck in Berbera, which is in the northern part of the Somalian, the Horn. You can probably see it in the map. Berbera is where the Gulf is written, a little below that. Now, Italy, part of the Oriental Force, had overrun Berbera. And as I said, the Indian contingent had been taken captive. So HMIS Cornwallis was deployed. And now there is young Bhaskar Suman, another famous admiral later to head the Navy. And Bhaskar Suman and a tall Brit petty officer, John Eckersley, accompanies. They didn't want noise, so they had a motorboat, but they decided to row all the way to the shore. And after they row, they come across, and you know what they find? The Italian contingent is fast asleep. So without firing a shot, they kind of capture. And so they surrendered, but they won't share where the Indian contingent was kept. So then Soman and Eckersley exchange some notes, and Eckersley just becomes all aggressive, captures one of the Italian sailors, takes him behind the wall, and a few minutes later, a gunshot is heard. Now he comes back all, sweating and his eyes red, and he goes and Soman points to the next guy, and he catches him, and they start singing. They literally share everything, and nobody had been shot. That was just a ruse that they had planned. So, these things happen in war. These are not what you plan for. These are not tactics you discuss. These are things that experience in war.